We're following parallel storylines today in Israel. One is the anticipated retaliation from Iran over the killings of Hezbollah and Hamas officials. The other is the potential for a ceasefire with Hamas, with reporting today that the president, leaders of Egypt and Qatar say they are prepared to present a final ceasefire proposal. If you're reading the terminal, you see that new round of ceasefire talks now set for August 15th. Very important as we add the voice of Mara Rudman, professor at the Miller Center at the University of Virginia, director of the Ripples of Hope Project, focused on democratic solutions. Mara, it's great to have you back. I don't know how you have both of these stories existing at once. And I'm going to point you to one more headline that crossed the terminal a short time ago from Reuters. Biden to lift offensive weapons sales ban to Saudi Arabia. When you factor that in, are we on the verge of a ceasefire breakthrough?
We've been at this point before, as you've noted. Everything is possible, which means that I would say we're at an inflection point. We can be moving toward the ceasefire, and those are key meetings next week, August 15th. It's also significant that Qatar, Egypt, and the United States together put out the statement about pushing for the August 15th meeting and about presenting a bridging proposal. At the same time, it's very unclear what Iran will be doing, what Hezbollah's calculations are. And so the next several days are just critical.
That's for sure. I just don't get, and maybe I'm being a little too simple here, Mara, how you can strike a ceasefire while Israel is also bracing for a potential retaliation from Iran. Are you thinking that won't happen?
No, I think that the two are actually interlinked. I'm going to bring you back to something that that Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who was so tragically assassinated by some of the very people related to folks in Bibi Netanyahu's cabinet. But Prime Minister Rabin used to talk about fighting for peace as if there was no war, and fighting wars as if there was no peace. And living in that combined space at the same time is typical not just for this region, but for many conflicts where you've got to look for ways to talk and to get to resolution. And at the same time, you've got to be prepared to fully defend yourself.
Mm-hmm. We remember, of course, what happened in April when Iran did respond. And the refrain that we've heard across the spectrum is that Hezbollah is not looking for a wider war. Iran is not looking for a wider war. And of course, Israel is not. Do you believe that to be true?
Yes, I believe that all of the actors, for a variety of reasons, recognize that a wider war is not in their interest. Sadly, in this kind of situation, that doesn't always mean that their actions will not trigger that wider war. And the role of the United States, in this case also of Egypt, Qatar, of the Saudis, of everyone else in the region and throughout the world, is to try to stress that longer term perspective, to try to keep folks away from the trigger finger, so as to speak, and to give incentives to the fullest extent possible to reach for what is in everyone's long-term interest, which is to avoid this tit for tat now.
Well, we're at a moment where a lot could happen here. And we remember May 31st, the day that Joe Biden addressed the nation, the world, from the White House with a 6-point ceasefire plan that he said Israel had signed off on. We saw, of course, in the days following that Benjamin Netanyahu may have signed off on something in principle, but was clearly not on board with the details at hand. Why should the White House trust him now?
So the White House is working with the state of Israel, and it's working as well with Qataris and Egyptians who are working with Hamas. The challenge that all of those who are trying to bring about the ceasefire face is that there are elements for Prime Minister Netanyahu and for Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, where any kind of ceasefire agreement is not in their direct, immediate political interest. And yet, for many of the people around them, in the case of Bibi Netanyahu, frankly, his entire military and security establishment, as well as the people of Israel, certainly the families of hostages, are pushing very hard for the nature and scoping of the ceasefire proposal that has been laid out. And in the case of Hamas, it's not just the countries around. Many Palestinians in Gaza are brave enough, courageous enough to speak out on the record about the challenges and how much they need a ceasefire, which takes a tremendous amount of risk and peril for them, given the vicious kind of leadership of Yahya Sinwar.
Mm-hmm. We've been surging military assets into the region, even more than we already had. Mara, F-22 jets now included, several more destroyers in the region. What are we planning for? What are we prepared to do to defend Israel if this retaliatory strike does come?
Well, what we've put into the region is certainly a show of force, and part of a strong deterrence, the strongest deterrence you can mobilize is to show the willingness to be able to defend and to help defend. And so that is part of what is going on right now. Certainly the United States showing with what you've described, what we are willing to bring into the region to help Israel defend itself, and any number of private conversations that are going on with players throughout the region, as was reported earlier today, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Egyptians, others are all talking to Iran as well about scaling this back, about the longer term interests of everyone in the region. Jordanians have been clear about not using their airspace for either side, frankly, which is part of, I think, how the kingdom there is trying to position itself to, again, damp down actions that could really result in tragedy across the region.
Fast forward to August 15th, again, the ceasefire talks that have been scheduled, the U.S., Qatar, Egypt. Is this Secretary of State Antony Blinken, or is this Bill Burns at the table for the United States? Do we know?
It's probably a combination. I think that Bill Burns has been the primary leader of this effort, of the behind the scenes. I think that Brett McGurk, who's at the White House at the NSC, works for Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, is very much kind of day-to-day hands-on. But Bill Burns clearly has a whole team as well. And I'm sure that Secretary Blinken is also very much involved. So it is a full team effort.
August 15th is next Thursday. Mara, what's more likely in that time? That we do have a breakthrough on a ceasefire, or Iran strikes Israel?
I don't want to put odds on that kind of situation. Honestly, what I try to remain focused on is what's so clearly in the United States' interest, in Israel's interest, in the interests of all those in the region, and absolutely for the hostages and their families, which is to reach a ceasefire deal. And doing so is obviously going to be much more possible in the near term if there are not actions by Hezbollah or by Iran in this intervening time period, which will certainly escalate and make a ceasefire that much more difficult.
Yeah, I only have a minute left here, Mara. We're in the throes of an important election here in the United States. To what extent would a Trump presidency embrace this ceasefire proposal? I'm assuming Kamala Harris would be in continuity with Joe Biden.
I think that's correct in terms of all signs that Kamala Harris has given. And in terms of a Trump administration, really, who knows? He has been all over the place on this issue. He was quite harsh to Israel and to the prime minister immediately after October 7th in a way that was surprising to people. He's also talked in ways he's not a negotiator, despite his let's make a deal kind of aura, the President Trump. He's not used to how you create win-win situations as opposed to zero sum. And this is a situation where you've got to figure out ways to get through that lead to a ceasefire deal. So I'm very concerned, perhaps not surprisingly, about how a Trump administration might handle what is going on now and kind of any future in the region.
From the Miller Center at the University of Virginia, Mara Rudman. It's great to have you back, Mara. Thank you so much for the insights at another very important moment here in geopolitics.